The shift didn't happen overnight. Throughout the course of writing my first book, I still got stuck all the time, but it became abundantly clear that I had picked the low-hanging fruit in managing my time. There were instead opportunities to be more productive, with less pain, in managing my mind. After all, why was it that I was banging my head against the wall 12 hours a day? Why was it that, seemingly out of nowhere, I would suddenly start making progress? Sometimes I would do an entire day's writing in only 15 minutes. The only problem was I had to sit at my keyboard all day to find that 15-minute window in which writing would suddenly come easily. If only I could sit down, do that 15 minutes of writing, and get on with the rest of my day, I thought. I'm sure you've experienced this before. You are working hard on something but not making progress. Maybe you were writing a book, maybe you were learning a language, or maybe you were simply making a tough life decision. You kept pushing, but it felt as if you were getting nowhere. You abandoned the project multiple times, but then, as you were on the edge of burning out, everything clicked. You had a fruitful writing session. You suddenly understood your new language, or that decision that once seemed impossible now seemed easy. Writing my first book was a creativity pressure cooker. That's what it took for me to realize that I needed to manage my mind instead of my time. But as I reflected on the experience, I saw that this also applied to other aspects of my life and work. In my career as a designer, I had often spent weeks thrashing about, sure I would never reach a solution, only to have that solution appear out of nowhere. As an entrepreneur, I had struggled to choose a direction, only to have the best choice become clear after sleeping on it. As a marketer, I had agonized over how best to expend limited resources, only later to feel confident about my cohesive plan. I could see parallels in learning to dance salsa, play guitar, or speak Spanish, even in making big life decisions. Most people's idea of productivity is to be able to produce a lot of something, to do a lot. Follow a series of steps and you're done. Do it over and over again. But more and more, if it can be completed in a series of steps, there's no point in doing it. AI and automation are poised to eliminate 40 to 50% of jobs within the next decade or two. It's the jobs in which people follow a series of steps that are the most at risk. AI expert Kai-Fu Lee says it's the optimization-based jobs that will be taken over first. Jobs such as loan underwriters, customer service representatives, even radiologists. Jobs that involve what Lee calls narrow tasks, such as finding the ideal rate for an insurance premium, maximizing a tax refund, or diagnosing an illness. Tasks involving optimizing data will be the first to go. Which jobs are safe from the reach of AI? According to Lee, it's the jobs that require creativity. When many people think of creativity, they think of watercolor paintings or macrame. But creativity expands way beyond those examples. Scientists who study creativity define it as coming up with something both novel and useful. According to Lee, if you have to think across different subjects, if you work in an unstructured environment, or if the outcomes of your work are hard to measure, the work you do will be relevant far into the future. These days, the mental work that matters isn't about following a series of steps. It's about finding your way to a novel and useful solution. In each November, aspiring writers set out to write a novel, the book kind of novel, in a month. It's a collective event called NaNoWriMo, short for National Novel Writing Month. Since 2013, in parallel to NaNoWriMo, computer programmers have been participating in NaNoGenMo, National Novel Generation Month. They try to generate novels using code. In the 2019 NaNoGenMo, some novels were written by an AI model once considered too dangerous to be released to the public. Yet the novels were still not even close to making sense. In fact, this AI model could hardly write a coherent sentence. AI expert Janelle Shane tweeted, "Struggling with crafting the first sentence of your novel? Be comforted by the fact that AI is struggling even more." The sentence this AI model generated for Janelle? "I was playing with my dog, Mark, the brown Labrador, and I had forgotten that I was also playing with a dead man." not exactly Tolstoy. You can type 50,000 words in a day. A computer can generate 50,000 words faster than you can blink. Yet, you can think up a 50,000-word novel in about a month. A computer can't do it at all. Your edge as a human is not in doing something quickly. No matter how fast you move, a computer can move faster. Your edge as a human is in thinking the thoughts behind the doing. As entrepreneur and investor Naval Ravikant has said, earn with your mind, not your time. This is true if those thoughts become the words in a novel, or if those thoughts help you learn a new skill that you add to your repertoire. It's true if you're an entrepreneur building a world-changing startup, or a social worker helping a family navigate the benefits available to care for an aging parent. Yet many of us approach productivity today as if it's the speed of production, not the quality of our thinking, that matters. You could trace this attitude back to Frederick Taylor. More than a century ago, Frederick Taylor revolutionized productivity. Today, the remnants of Taylorism, as his methods came to be known, are ruining productivity.
Happen overnight. Throughout the course of writing my first book, I still got stuck all the time. But it became abundantly clear that I had picked the low-hanging fruit in managing my time. There were instead opportunities to be more productive with less pain in managing my mind. After all, why was it that I was banging my head against the wall 12 hours a day? Why was it that, seemingly out of nowhere, I would suddenly start making progress? Sometimes I would do an entire day's writing in only 15 minutes. The only problem was I had to sit at my keyboard all day to find that 15-minute window in which writing would suddenly come easily. If only I could sit down, do that 15 minutes of writing, and get on with the rest of my day, I thought. I'm sure you've experienced this before. You were working hard on something but not making progress. Maybe you were writing a book. Maybe you were learning a language. Or maybe you were simply making a tough life decision. You kept pushing, but it felt as if you were getting nowhere. You abandoned the project multiple times. But then, as you were on the edge of burning out, everything clicked. You had a fruitful writing session. You suddenly understood your new language, or that decision that once seemed impossible now seemed easy. Writing my first book was a creativity pressure cooker. That's what it took for me to realize that I needed to manage my mind instead of my time. But as I reflected on the experience, I saw that this also applied to other aspects of my life and work. In my career as a designer, I'd often spent weeks thrashing about, sure I would never reach a solution, only to have that solution appear out of nowhere. As an entrepreneur, I had struggled to choose a direction, only to have the best choice become clear after sleeping on it. As a marketer, I had agonized over how best to expend limited resources, only to later feel confident about my cohesive plan. I could see parallels in learning to dance salsa, play guitar, or speak Spanish, even in making big life decisions. Most people's idea of productivity is to be able to produce a lot of something, to do a lot. Follow a series of steps and you're done. Do it over and over again. But more and more, if it can be completed in a series of steps, there's no point in doing it. AI and automation are poised to eliminate 40 to 50% of jobs within the next decade or two. It's the jobs in which people follow a series of steps that are the most at risk. AI expert Kai-Fu Lee says it's the optimization-based jobs that will be taken over first. Jobs such as loan underwriters, customer service representatives, even radiologists. Jobs involving what Lee calls narrow tasks, such as finding the ideal rate for an insurance premium, maximizing a tax refund, or diagnosing an illness. Tasks involving optimizing data will be the first to go. Which jobs are safe from the reach of AI? According to Lee, it's the jobs that require creativity. When many people think of creativity, they think of watercolor paintings or macrame. But creativity expands way beyond those examples. Scientists who study creativity define it as coming up with something both novel and useful. According to Lee, if you have to think across different subjects, if you work in an unstructured environment, or if the outcomes of your work are hard to measure, the work you do will be relevant far into the future. These days, the mental work that matters isn't about following a series of steps. It's about finding your way to a novel and useful solution. Each November, aspiring writers set out to write a novel, the book kind of novel, in a month. It's a collective event called NaNoWriMo, short for National Novel Writing Month. They try to generate novels using code. In the 2019 NaNoWriMo Genmo, some novels were written by an AI model once considered too dangerous to be released to the public. Yet the novels were still not even close to making sense. In fact, this AI model could hardly write a coherent sentence. AI expert Janelle Shane tweeted, "Struggling with crafting the first sentence of your novel? Be comforted by the fact that AI is struggling even more." The sentence this AI model generated for Janelle was, "I was playing with my dog, Mark the Brown Labrador, and I had forgotten that I was also playing with a dead man." Not exactly Tolstoy. You can type 50,000 words in a day. A computer can generate 50,000 words faster than you can blink. Yet you can think up a 50,000-word novel in about a month. A computer can't do it at all. Your edge as a human is not in doing something quickly. No matter how fast you move, a computer can move faster. Your edge as a human is in thinking the thoughts behind the doing. As entrepreneur and investor Naval Ravikant has said, "Earn with your mind, not your time." This is true if those thoughts become the words in a novel, or if those thoughts help you learn a new skill that you add to your repertoire. It's true if you're an entrepreneur building a world-changing startup, or a social worker helping a family navigate the benefits available for caring for an aging parent. Yet many approach productivity today as if it's the speed of production, not the quality of our thinking that matters. You could trace this attitude back to Frederick Taylor. More than a century ago, Frederick Taylor revolutionized productivity. Today, the remnants of Taylorism, as his methods came to be known, are ruining productivity.
Has become our God value. Author Mark Manson describes a God value as the top of our value hierarchy and the lens through which we interpret all other values. Our God value is the most important factor by which we decide to choose one thing over another. As time worshippers, saying yes to a meeting invitation that fills empty space on our calendar is clearly better than leaving that space empty. More events in less time is better. And we can't imagine what we do with empty space on our calendar. As time worshippers, struggling once again to speed read seems worth it because moving your eyes over more words in less time is clearly better than moving your eyes over fewer words in more time. Never mind if we immediately forget what we've just read, never apply it to our lives, and kill any pleasure we once took in the act of reading. As time worshippers, when we're multitasking, it at least feels as if we're doing more things in less time. Even if research shows we're merely wasting time and energy switching between tasks over and over. Our time worship drives us to do strange things to save time. There's an app called Exit Strategy, which helps New Yorkers save time while riding the subway. Exit Strategy shows you which subway car to get on so that when you reach your destination, wait for it, you can exit the station faster. It sounds like an obscure idea, but Exit Strategy has earned its developer a small fortune. In my college dorm, I had a neighbor who was running every time I saw him. The first time I saw him, I thought he must be in a rush, but the 100th time, I figured something must be up. When I finally did get to ask him, when he wasn't running, why he was always running, he reasoned, it saves time. Not surprisingly, he was an engineering major. I'm no stranger to employing weird tactics myself in order to save time. Are you ready for this? I've actually taught myself to press the elevator button for my floor, like a no-look pass, by looking in the mirror in the back of my apartment building's elevator. I save a tiny amount of time because I don't have to turn around before I press the button. Saving time is not without value. According to Exit Strategy, burying your face in their app will shave minutes off every subway trip. Emphasis mine. I estimate that my ingenious no-look elevator button press saves me a grand total of 2 seconds a week. I suppose my neighbor did save time and got exercise while running all over campus, but what did he do if he saw a friend? Decide that stopping and talking for a minute would be a waste of time? To each their own, but time worship permeates American culture, affecting the way others treat you, no matter how much you try to forget about time. That friend who always shows up late because he can't risk being early. The waiter who slams down the check before you finished chewing your last bite and then hovers over your table impatiently. The woman behind you in line at the supermarket who loudly groans after you commit the mortal sin of stealing 3 seconds from her day by dropping your credit card. The root of all of this incivility lies in praying to the false god of time. When you choose a God value, all your decisions optimize for one thing at the expense of everything else. What other things could you think about or do while leaving a subway station at a normal pace? What valuable college relationships did my neighbor miss out on by running all the time? Which neighbors would invite me to parties if I didn't make a fool of myself in the elevator? You can cut calories toward a healthy diet, but at some point you've cut too many calories. You can save time toward a productive life, but at some point you've cut too much life. 30% of working Americans are apparently so short on time that they now get less than 6 hours of sleep. That reduction from the recommended 8 hours is not only enough to kill their creativity, it also increases their risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and other serious illnesses. Additionally, it leaves many with no choice but to consume copious amounts of caffeine, driving a downward spiral of less restful sleep, stunted memory formation, and further health risks.
To get more out of our time, as if our hourglasses were filled with golden dust, it's surprising how little respect our culture has for time. People are actually offended if you leave time unplanned for, unused, or empty. We say people with time-consuming hobbies or interests have too much time on their hands. While that time is on their hands, apparently they should fight it, perhaps by using the practice of time boxing. If they still can't pound something productive into the empty time on their schedule, they should do more than fight time. They should kill time. Yet when someone has the opportunity to steal some of our time, they change their tune. We have the gall to refer to unused time as free time. Do we call our unused money free money? No. Ironic, in a world where time is money. Time is apparently money when your boss is using it, yet somehow it's free time when it's left over for you to use. Most companies allow coworkers to see each other's calendars for the sake of seeing that unused time. That way, others can fill gaps in our day by scheduling meetings. Entrepreneur and author Jason Fried cleverly calls it calendar Tetris. Our time is free for them to take. This practice is so widespread, there's now an app called Look Busy, which fills your calendar with fake events so your coworkers can't steal more of your time. This flippant regard for people's time is perpetuated by the false notion that time is a commodity. Time management wisdom will tell you that once time has passed, you can't get it back. Here comes a counterintuitive concept, so you might need to read it twice. Time you don't use now pays dividends in the future. Consider that Bill Gates came to the realization that Microsoft should create its first web browser during one of his Think Weeks in a secluded cabin,
or that Google's greatest products, including Gmail and AdSense, were created during the 20% time when engineers could work on whatever they wanted. If those examples are still too industrious to convince you, consider that Stephen King recommends novelists put their first draft in a drawer for 6 weeks before daring to review it, that Elizabeth Bishop took such long breaks on projects that 20 years elapsed between her starting and finishing one of her poems, and that Malcolm Gladwell says the first task of a writer is to create enough space and time for writing to emerge. Catch-22 author Joseph Heller would often lie down and just think about the book all afternoon, daydream, if you will. George Carlin recommended that everyone do a little daydreaming. Just sit at the window, stare at the clouds. It's good for you. His own advice helped him become one of the greatest stand-up comedians ever, by anyone's estimation. Or consider that Marisol would sit so still for hours at a time, like one of her sculptures, that spiders built webs between her arm and torso on a regular basis. As The Color Purple author Alice Walker said, in order to invite any kind of guest, including creativity, you have to make room for it. When we have extra money, we save a nest egg. That nest egg will earn interest and become more valuable in the future. As these examples clearly illustrate, the time we leave unused in the present can have the same effect. Time spent doing nothing today reaps benefits tomorrow. So when you save time, keep it. Clearly, our use of time management has surpassed the point of diminishing returns and the point of negative returns. To do the creative thinking we need in today's world, we need a different way of getting things done.
Paradigm makes two false assumptions that are at odds with what it means to be productive in today's world. The first false assumption time management makes is that time management treats time as a commodity. Everyone has the same 24 hours in the day, you'll hear people say. It's as if you could line up those hours like bushels of corn or blocks of frozen orange juice concentrate, each unit the same as the previous unit. But that's far from true. A few years after writing my first book, I worked with behavioral scientist and predictably irrational author Dan Ariely. Dan wanted to use his behavioral science knowledge to design a productivity app with the guidance of my early theories on mind management. We later sold the app to Google, where some of the features we came up with became a part of the calendar app. One observation that quickly became clear to us is that when you look at each of those 24 hours in a day, one unit of time is very different from another unit of time. Rhythms within our bodies and within the world around us make each hour different from the next. Some hours are better for thinking analytically. Other hours are better for thinking creatively. As I'll explain in the following chapters, all hours are not created equal. The second false assumption that time management makes is that being productive is about producing. Producing is right there in the word productive. Time management in its most basic form is about producing the maximum output in the minimum time. Yet the impact of what you produce in 1 minute can vary greatly when compared to the impact of what you produce in the next minute. The impact of one product versus another can be night and day. You could write a novel that sells 0 copies, or you could write a novel that sells 1 million copies. You could start a business that fails, or you could start a business that changes the world. You could create a marketing plan that doesn't move the needle, or you could create a marketing plan that puts your product on the map. The time you spend on one result versus another may be exactly the same. You can work just as hard on the novel that sells 0 copies as the novel that sells 1 million copies. Both novels may have the same number of words. Both novels may be free of misspellings and grammar mistakes. The thing that determines whether what you produce does extraordinarily well or extraordinarily poorly is the quality of your ideas. When you're moving chunks of iron, you can easily connect the work with the results. You pick up the iron and you've moved it closer to its destination. But when you look at how ideas happen, you can't connect the quality of those ideas to the time you spend on them. Yes, with any novel, you're going to have to spend some time moving your fingers on the keyboard. But the juicy idea behind the novel that sells 1 million copies may come out of nowhere. Neuroscientists can give people a creative problem to solve. In an instant, as I'll talk about more in the next chapter, those people can go from having made no progress on the problem to solving the problem. You can see the aha moment in their brains. It takes no time to have an idea, yet you have that idea in that instant because of things you did long before. Just ask opera singer Marian Anderson, who said, when learning a new piece of music, what has appeared useless labor for days becomes fruitful at an unpredictable moment. In creativity, unlike in moving chunks of iron, action and result are hard to connect. Maybe your brain is better suited for having an idea because you took a vacation last month. Maybe it's because you got a massage a couple days ago. Right before you had the idea, a woman walked by wearing a funny-looking hat, and that sparked the moment of insight. Yet the true seed of the idea may be a book your mother read to you when you were 5. The idea appeared to come randomly, but your past knowledge and experience, mixed with the right mental conditions, set the stage for the idea to happen. As the great sculptor Constantine Brancusi said, things are not difficult to make. What is difficult is putting ourselves in the state of mind to make them. Being productive today isn't about typing faster so you can write more words in less time, or shoehorning as many meetings into your schedule as possible. Like planting a seed in nutrient-rich soil and feeding it the water and sunlight that it needs in order to grow, today's productivity is about creating the conditions within your mind to have valuable thoughts. Being productive today isn't about time management, it's about mind management.
Some productivity experts have taken us beyond the time management paradigm, recognizing that not all time is created equal, and that you can get wildly different results from the same time investment. You can prioritize what you will and won't spend time on with the Eisenhower method of choosing the not urgent but important over the urgent but not important, as made famous by Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You can choose to do the few things that bring you most of the results, using the 80-20 or Pareto principle, as popularized by Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. You can cut out all but the most essential things in life, as espoused in Greg McKeown's Essentialism. Additionally, some experts have already built the foundation for mind management. My personal favorite productivity system, David Allen's Getting Things Done, helps free up your creative energy by putting all the inputs in your life into a trusted system. It's what Maura Thomas would call attention management. More recently, Cal Newport identified that, in an age with unprecedented sources of distraction, it's those who can cultivate deep work who will get an edge. All these ways of thinking about productivity are valuable in their own way. Even time management is valuable, up to a point. But mind management picks up where all these methods leave off. Time management optimizes the resource of time. Mind management optimizes the resource of creative energy. Consider this passage from Getting Things Done. It's what Allen calls the 4 criteria model for choosing actions in the moment, which is a method for deciding what task you can do at any given moment. At 3:22 on Wednesday, how do you choose what to do? At that moment, there are 4 criteria you can apply, in this order: context, time available, energy available, and priority. Yes, in any given moment when you're deciding what you can get done, the context is important. For some things, you need a computer. Other things you can do on your phone while standing in line. Another factor determining what you can get done is the amount of time you have available. Finally, you'll choose the higher priority action over the lower priority action. But the energy available is also critically important. Sometimes your mind is better suited to think creatively. Other times, it's better suited to think analytically. Sometimes you're in the mood to do some research. Other times, you're better off taking care of some pesky details.
Elite athletes warm up before a big game. They wouldn't expect to roll out of bed and perform at their peak. Yet too many of us treat our to-do lists as if anything is possible at any moment. What if at 3:22 every Wednesday, you didn't have to decide what to do? What if you managed your creative energy so well that instead of staring puzzled at your to-do list, it was obvious what you should do at that time? This level of mastery is possible with mind management. If you want to immediately get a taste of what it's like to use mind management, here's a simple exercise for you. The next time you set out to be productive, ask yourself, what work am I in the mood to do right now? Then ask yourself, what do I need to do that fits that mood? Too many of us live by the to-do list. We look at what needs to be done, then try to force ourselves to do it. It's no wonder why, even if we have the time, we rarely have the energy. But when our mental state is aligned with the task at hand, suddenly everything is easier. Our projects drive forward swiftly as the barriers that once caused procrastination dissolve one by one. If you've ever experienced the perfect alignment of mental state with activity, you know what I mean. To get into flow, you need to go with the flow. But sometimes something simply needs to get done now. In these cases, you can ask yourself, what mood would be most conducive to doing this work? Then ask yourself, when was the last time I felt that way? Finally, see if you can replicate the conditions that put you in that mood. It may seem impossible at first, but just as a hand can learn to effortlessly form chords on a guitar, contorting fingers into positions that once seemed to defy the limits of the human body, you can learn to trigger changes in your mental state, especially with the help of the tools I'll share in this book.
Questions about my mental state and the task at hand time and time again throughout writing my first book. Soon, patterns emerged in my process. I noticed that the right mood for certain types of work happened at certain times of day. I developed a grab bag of routines and rituals I could pull from when I needed to change my mood. Additionally, I began to notice hidden boundaries in my thinking. Tasks that once seemed as if they were one task turned out to neatly separate into several tasks, each promoted by their own separate mood. Once I was done with my book and reflected on the process I used to finish it, I found that much of what I had intuitively discovered was supported by the latest creativity research. I pored over books and research papers on neuroscience and psychology. The findings were strewn about, but I saw the pieces all fit together. I realized I had on my hands the beginnings of a reliable yet flexible system for creativity. Yet as I tried to formalize what I had learned and apply it to my life and work, I realized that to truly push the limits of mind management, I needed to make a big change. One day, I was in my home office in Chicago, struggling to write. I wanted to reference an article I had written previously, so I went to fetch the link. 10 minutes later, I realized that I was still reading my old article. It sounds self-obsessive, but I have reliably found as a writer that most of what you write you can't stand to read yourself. But if you've written something really good, you'll want to read it over and over again. That was what was happening. I had gotten sucked into my own writing. Why can't I write like this today? I asked myself. Later that same week, I was reading another older article, and the same thing happened. I searched my mind for the commonalities. What separates my good writing from the rest of it? I realized that I was sitting in Chicago, but I had written neither of these articles while in Chicago. I had written these articles while in South America. I then reflected on all my best work from the previous few years. I realized I was producing all my best work while I was in Colombia. For the previous 3 winters, I had spent a couple months in Medellin, the former home of the infamous drug lord Pablo Escobar and the former murder capital of the world. Medellin has since drastically reduced its crime rate and become a popular destination for so-called digital nomads, people who work online and spend a few months in one destination after another. I didn't visit Medellin as part of a regular rotation in between other digital nomad destinations such as Bali or Budapest. I merely visited to escape a couple of the worst months of Chicago's brutal winter.
I didn't know at the time what it was about MetaYen that allowed me to do better work, but I knew I had to find out. At this point, it had been a few years since launching my first book, Designed for Hackers. I had made some attempts to write another book, but I had failed. When I finished writing my first book, I felt an incredible sense of peace and an incredible sense of horror. I felt at peace because I had accomplished something I had set out to do. It was a gigantic to-do item that had been marked done. But I felt horror because I was certain I would want to write a book again. In the wake of the project lay a trail of loneliness, depression, and neglected relationships. There was no way I could repeat that process. Still, I desperately wanted to write another book. As Maya Angelou supposedly said, there is no agony greater than bearing an untold story inside you. Yet Viktor Frankl, who suffered the horrors of concentration camps, paraphrased Nietzsche by saying, anyone who discovers their creative work knows the why for his existence and will be able to bear almost any how. By accident, I had discovered the why for my existence. I wanted to write books. But I had already bared a painful and self-destructive how, a how that I knew was ultimately counterproductive. If I wanted any chance at a happy life, and if I wanted any chance at doing better work, I needed to make a big change. So I set out to make the best possible use of my creative energy. To do so, I needed to move to another continent.
In this book, I share a cohesive and flexible system for managing creative energy. This is my proposal to humanity to let go of the notion that we can squeeze more from our time. Instead, let's think about how to get more from our minds. We'll start in the next chapter with the single building block of creative thinking, the moment of insight. If we understand what a creative insight is and how insightful thinking differs from analytical thinking, we can know how to create the conditions for insight to happen. We'll find your creative sweet spot so you can do your best creative thinking when the time is right. Then we'll break down the creative process. Creative work is so unpredictable because progress doesn't happen linearly. Instead, our creative projects iterate through the 4 stages of creativity. If we learn what these stages are and how to create room for them, we can stop struggling to achieve solutions and start letting those solutions come to us. Then we'll talk about mental states. Just as there are many hours in the day that you use to manage your time, there are various mental states that your mind inhabits. I've identified 7 mental states that effortlessly move creative projects forward. I'll show you what those mental states are and help you identify how to match your mental state to the task at hand, or vice versa. Next, we'll learn how to leverage the power of creative cycles. You'll learn to see the natural ups and downs in the creative process and the natural ups and downs in your own creative energy, as well as in the world around you. By timing your efforts according to creative cycles, you'll make more progress with less sweat. Then we'll wrap all of this into creative systems. Creative systems turn your projects into repeatable systems that are flexible enough and that provide enough space to account for the fickle nature of creative thinking. You'll learn how to design creative systems that allow you to do some of your best thinking when you aren't actively thinking, and that feed into one another, turning tiny actions into big outcomes. You can plan the perfect system, but it's only useful if it can stand up to the unexpected and unplanned. In the final chapter, you'll learn about creating in chaos. Learn how to keep your projects moving forward when life's inevitable chaos gets in the way. In fact, learn how to recognize the creative opportunities presented by that chaos and capture and cultivate those opportunities to make use of them the next time you're racking your brain for ideas. I'm not a professor at an Ivy League university. I'm not a productivity consultant. I'm not a journalist for a major newspaper, nor do I aspire to be any of these things. I'm just another creative trying to make my ideas real before I leave this world. As with all of my books, I'm writing it to solidify these concepts in my own mind and hopefully help you while I'm at it. So I'll be presenting these concepts the same way I discovered them, through my own experiences. I'll take you along on my journey, from the soaring skyscrapers of Chicago to the rolling green hills of Colombia to the blistering desert heat of Arizona. You'll be there with me from my highest highs to my lowest lows. I don't expect this will be like any productivity book you've read before. It will make you laugh, and it might even make you cry. I know writing it did both for me. You don't have to move to another continent to start managing your mind instead of time. Consider me the subject of an experiment of which you can now reap the benefits. It would have been impossible for the average American living in American culture to live according to what I discovered in the process of building this system. If you want to kill creativity, get 5 hours of sleep a night, fight traffic for 2 hours a day, and start each day with a piping hot thermos of a psychoactive drug. This is the unfortunate and inescapable reality of most Americans today. Some of what I present may seem impossible in today's time management world. Consider this book a blueprint for the future, my proposal for us to ease back on our time management world and start building a mind management world. It won't be a cultural shift that we can all make at once. Implement what you can from this book. One day, I dream that workplaces, schools, and public spaces will start working not according to what gets the most output out of the least amount of time, but instead according to what contributes to the appropriate mental state for what we're trying to achieve. We'll stop forcing adolescents to go to school early in the morning when their biological clocks still want them to be in bed. We'll let go of time worship and stop making decisions because it's the most efficient use of every resource except creative energy. We'll stop forcing people to work in noisy, open office environments, vulnerable to interruptions that can break any state of focus they might be able to achieve. We'll start showing respect for the invaluable resource of creative energy. Let's return now to the beginning of my experiment in redesigning my life to manage creative energy instead of time. To prioritize creativity, I needed to intimately understand creativity and to find where my best ideas lie. I needed to find my creative sweet spot. It wasn't until after I moved to Colombia that I realized exactly what made it the perfect place to manage my mind.